Yeah, I'm very excited about this topic because it's because within Australia, it's not yet at the level that it is in the US or Canada. And so, it's not yet selling within the dispensaries to people on the street. So this conversation is to really understand how change happens and how to do business in this kind of environment, which is an interesting one. But let's start with misconceptions, right? Because I think that there are quite a lot of misconceptions around the cannabis plant because of how it's portrayed in the media. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions around?
Well, you could wrap them all into a bundle by saying that cannabis is a harmful substance which causes psychosis, which leads people into dependency, which makes them more likely to become addicted to harder drugs, and will basically ruin not only their lives but the lives of everybody around them. And it's just not true. Cannabis now is one of the most studied plants on the planet. If you go to the databases, you'll find something close to 30,000 different published scientific reports on cannabis. And the vast majority of them demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt that cannabis is actually a very safe and efficacious therapeutic remedy for many, many, many different human ailments. It is also, and this is often not talked about enough, a remarkable raw material. The way I like to describe it is cannabis is not only brings us closer to nature, or wakes up our spirits and brings us closer to nature, but gives us the raw material we need to build a new life-affirming economy. So that's just a little bit of what I think is the real truth of cannabis.
And so why was it made illegal? And now why is it becoming legalized again?
So cannabis was made illegal in the United States, mainly because of the way that it came to the country. Cannabis came to the U.S. in the hands of Black people and brown people. There were two vectors. One was across the southwestern border with Mexico. This happened right around the time of the Mexican Revolution, around 1910, when you had hundreds of thousands of Mexican refugees who were coming into the United States, and they were fleeing warfare. So they brought with them their folk medicine. Cannabis had been incorporated into the folk curandero system of medicine in Mexico for hundreds of years. Like today, a lot of those brown-skinned refugees were not welcomed by a lot of white Americans. There was a lot of racism. It was actually much worse then than it is even today. And the first laws against cannabis in the United States date from that time, 1911, 1912, 1913, and they were state laws, California, Texas, Arizona, states that bordered Mexico. And then later on, you saw the same thing happen with Black people. Afro-Caribbean sailors brought cannabis with them into ports like New Orleans, where it played a very important role in the development of jazz, and then spread throughout the American mainstream, largely along the same routes that jazz music spread. And in the 1930s, there was a campaign to make cannabis illegal at the federal level, which was driven by a guy named Harry Anslinger. Anslinger's real agenda was racism, but he dressed it up in the jacket of cannabis.
And why is it becoming legalized again now?
It's becoming legalized again now because the real truth about cannabis is coming out. So the breakthrough in the cannabis reform movement, which has basically been going on almost ever since cannabis was made illegal, many people don't realize it, but in 1944, the famous mayor of New York City, Fiorello LaGuardia, organized a commission on cannabis, and that commission said all of the things that we know to be true about cannabis today, that it's not addictive, that it does not cause psychosis, that it does not cause criminality, and that, in fact, there's a lot of good science to demonstrate that it's medically effective. It really took until the 1990s for change to happen, and it happened in San Francisco during the AIDS crisis, when a wonderful guy named Dennis Perrone, an old friend of mine, who was an underground cannabis dealer, started noticing that Dennis was a gay man, so he was deep into the gay community. The gay community of San Francisco at that time was just being devastated by AIDS. thousands and thousands of people are dying. There's no remedy. Nobody really knows what's going on. But Dennis is a dealer, and he deals to the gay community and starts noticing that the people who have AIDS who are using cannabis are living longer and having a higher quality of life than people who are not consuming cannabis. So he immediately starts giving away as much cannabis as he can. He goes to all of the cannabis growers that he knows and explains that he wants to give away the cannabis to AIDS patients so that they can live. And he starts this just underground distribution. And it caught on. It became a big thing in San Francisco. Eventually, the cops realized what Dennis was doing. They came and they arrested him. And Dennis's response was to go public and to get an initiative placed on the ballot in San Francisco in 1991 to legalize medical cannabis. And that's really what kicked us off into the modern era of cannabis reform.
And the medical side of cannabis has been around for a while, but the retail side, where you can just walk off the street and purchase it, that only happened just recently. What was that? What was the catalyst for that transition? Because forever it was about, it's for medical purposes, but now it's kind of shifted where you can just walk into the shop and get it. So what changed?
Well, I'll talk about the state of California. Of course, in the United States, we have a situation where federal law still does not recognize any medical use or any legitimate use for cannabis, whereas a majority of the states under their state laws do recognize that cannabis is useful either for medical purposes or for what we call adult use, which means any purpose whatsoever. Adults can just make up their own mind about whether to use it or not.
Like chocolate, yeah.
Yeah. So in California, from 1996 until 2018, we had a loosely regulated nonprofit medical cannabis system that basically envisioned groups of growers coming together and pooling their cannabis into dispensaries, into collectives, and then providing that to the patients. That's how I built Harborside, was on that legal structure. But there's always been a desire to have completely legal cannabis. There were a lot of people who wanted to consume cannabis, but didn't see themselves as being ill, didn't see themselves as being sick, and they didn't feel comfortable going to their doctors and lying and saying that they were, or in many cases, even if they were using cannabis for therapeutic purposes, because of stigma, they didn't feel comfortable talking to their healthcare providers. So there's always been a desire to make cannabis, completely free and legal, like any other consumer product is. And that's really what was driving the movement in California. In 2016, we passed another initiative which legalized cannabis for all purposes, not just for medical purposes. But one of the big changes was that we went from a nonprofit market to a for-profit market. At roughly the same time, the Canadian stock exchanges, where cannabis is legal at the federal level, opened their stock exchanges to U.S. cannabis companies. So this really changed the scene in California, which previously was, a lot of people who really came out of a sort of a hippie milieu, who had a personal relationship with the plant, who really believed in it, who were running the industry, to now you more and more are seeing cannabis corporations in California that are financed by the public markets, that are usually managed and operated by people who don't have much, if any, relationship with cannabis whatsoever. And so you've really seen, quite a dramatic change in the nature of the cannabis industry in my home state of California in the past few years.